Imagine, just for a second, a landscape that has slowly, quietly turned against you over the past few weeks. You're a prehistoric mother sitting right at the mouth of a cave. The light is fading fast, you don't have a lighter, you don't have matches, you certainly don't have a thermostat, and most terrifyingly of all, you don't even have the guarantee of fire. In this explainer, we're going to unpack a really visceral three-act story of human survival, completely based on archaeological evidence and physiological science. We're going way back to look at what it actually meant to face the very first real winters of human existence.
The sun goes down earlier than it did yesterday. Now that sounds like a super simple observation, right? But for this mother, it's a literal countdown. The grass that fed the animals her group hunted has browned and died off. The river that used to run loud and fast now moves slow and thin. And there's this skin of ice forming at the edges every single morning. And her breath, it's fogging up in front of her face, even in the early evening. It definitely didn't used to do that. She notices all these tiny little changes the exact same way you'd notice a friend's mood shifting before anything is officially wrong. The cold is creeping in. She and her kids are incredibly vulnerable, just wrapped up in animal skins that suddenly, well, they just don't feel like enough anymore.
Act 1. The Gathering Dark. The reality before reliable fire.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the history gets absolutely fascinating. Anthropologists believe that in the earliest periods of human history, these early groups had to survive brutal winters relying on basically three things: found shelter, shared body warmth, and just constantly moving around to chase warmer weather. The luxury of having warmth on demand, it literally did not exist. Archaeologist Will Robrooks, who has studied early human fire use a ton, points out that reliable, controlled firemaking was something that developed really gradually. So what does that mean? It means there was this massive, terrifying gap in human history. Our ancestors definitely knew fire existed. They'd see a lightning strike or find a smoldering branch. But knowing it exists and being able to intentionally summon it out of thin air on a freezing night when your kids are shivering, those are two completely different things. They simply couldn't conjure it up when they desperately needed it.
So to make up for that lack of fire, they relied heavily on inherited, unspoken knowledge just to choose a cave. They had to factor in wind direction, sun exposure, how close they were to unfrozen water. And guys, this wasn't just random guesswork. The groups that consistently survived had learned exactly which spots offered genuine protection. But here's the really chilling part. This knowledge was a stubborn survival strategy that was paid for by the fatal errors of previous generations. Think about it. Someone in an earlier winter chose a shelter that only looked protective, and they didn't make it. The survivors carried that brutal lesson forward in their bodies, passing it quietly from one exhausted, careful person to the next.
Which really brings us to the ultimate question of this whole explainer. So how did anyone actually survive this? Not as some dry statistic in a textbook, but in actual reality. How did one family manage to make it through the night with absolutely nothing but what they could carry, the skins on their backs, and those unspoken lessons they already knew? Let's step inside the cave and find out.
Act 2. The Deep Cold. The Physiology of Survival.
So it's the middle of the night now. The entire pacing of the world has just slowed right down. The family is layered together deep inside the cave under whatever skins and furs they managed to scrape together. With the environment actively trying to kill them, their survival relies completely on each other and the actual biology of thermoregulation. That's the body's ability to manage its own temperature. Researchers note that huddling together meaningfully reduces heat loss for small groups, and this is especially critical for children because they lose body heat way faster than adults do relative to their size. So that mother pulling her kids in tight, she isn't just seeking comfort. She is enacting a literal, biological, life-saving mechanism.
Let's break down how this actually builds as the long night drags on. First off, you've got the sound of the wind. It finds absolutely every tiny gap in the cave entrance. Then comes the unavoidable sound of teeth chattering in the dark, with someone trying so desperately to stay quiet about it. And finally, you hit stage 3. It's this very specific kind of exhausted alertness. They are way too cold to actually fall asleep, but they're far too exhausted to stay fully awake. Just hour after agonizing hour, waiting for a sun that feels impossibly far away.
And then the shivering stops. Now, the crucial point here, and the part that should honestly terrify you, is understanding what this means when you're dealing with true dangerous cold. Shivering is your body actively fighting to stay warm. It's doing its job. When a child stops shivering, it is definitely not a sign that they're getting better. It is a massive red flag. It's a sign that the body is giving up the fight. It's conserving whatever tiny bit of heat is left only for the vital organs and just abandoning everything else. It is this incredibly specific stillness in a small body that signals an absolute life or death crisis.
To really understand how they fight back in a moment like this, we've got to look at the survival timeline. Surviving this specific terrifying night actually depended on some pretty rudimentary food preservation choices that they made months earlier. Anthropologists believe that early humans were drawing meat and storing fat way before they had reliable fire. Winter wasn't just fought during the winter, it was fought back in the summer and the autumn. A handful of berries set aside here, a piece of meat hung up to dry in the cold air instead of being eaten right away when food was actually plentiful. In the absolute darkest, coldest moment of this night, those stored calories acting as fuel inside their bodies were literally the only thing standing between them and the end.
Act 3. The Dawn. The Morning Resolution.
The mother pulls her completely still child fully against her own skin, getting them under absolutely every layer she has. She isn't sleeping. She is fiercely rubbing the child's small hands between her own in the pitch black. She's talking to them, quietly, constantly, because doing nothing, that was never an option. And slowly, agonizingly slowly, the morning sky finally begins to lighten at the edge of the cave. And then, the child is shivering again. She doesn't need to understand the advanced medical science behind exactly why this is happening. She just knows, underneath all that crushing exhaustion, that it feels like the best news in the world. The physical and emotional relief of that moment is just immense. It means the child's body finally has enough energy and warmth to resume the fight. For one more morning, against literally all the odds of the ancient world, they have survived.
I really want you to consider this powerful truth. None of it came with a guarantee. It came only as a kind of inheritance. Surviving a winter without dependable fire required this unbroken chain of absolute, stubborn endurance. It required body heat to be shared without any hesitation, food to be saved instead of eaten, and this imperfectly passed down ancestral knowledge. That mother didn't know for sure if her choices would be enough, but she carried the inherited weight of every single winter that had been survived before her, passed silently right into her hands.
Let's picture that cave entrance again, but now it's bathed in the light of dawn. I want you to think about what this means for you, sitting here watching this explainer right now. Moments like this terrifying night, they happened thousands and thousands of times. And honestly, most of them ended badly. But the simple fact that you exist at all, sitting in a warm room right now with electricity and the internet, means that an unbroken chain of these exact nights, stretching back way further than human memory, all somehow ended the right way. Your very existence is the literal biological proof that this stubborn ancestral strategy actually worked.
Which leaves us with this final thought. If you are the living, breathing proof of an unbroken chain of desperately survived nights, if the sheer resilience of that mother is quite literally written into your DNA, what other unspoken inheritances are keeping you alive today? What quiet strengths have been passed into your hands without even realizing it? Think about that the next time you step out into the cold.